Let's talk about Planet Coaster 1.5. Yeah, you heard that right. A lot of people have commented that they feel like this game, Planet Coaster 2, should be Planet Coaster 1.5 or should be a big DLC. So in this video I'm going to go over the 5 most frequently criticized aspects of this game and why I think it should be a successor in the form of a DLC rather than a new game. I will also give you my very own opinion on that and giving you a bit of context why I think we need to see it from a different point of view, but more about that later. So let's start with the very first point and also basically the most mentioned one, but it's also the easiest one to kind of talk about because this is coasters received no change, and simply because this game is about coasters, people are commenting no switch tracks, no blah blah blah. Well, it's a very easy one to talk about because there is not anything to talk about. They did not really reveal anything about the new coaster builder. They didn't talk about how the coasters are. They don't talk about if there's continuous roll. We don't know if there may be switch tracks. And the only little thing I could give in is that the stations still look very big. And I do agree to that certain thing. They still look very big. But again, we haven't seen that in action. We don't know if this is just because Frontier didn't customize anything. But to be fair, yeah, I kind of agree that this is a little bit of an odd thing that they still have these gigantic platforms. But again, let's wait for finally see anything before we talk about that. So this is why I will end this first point here already. There is no discussion because we don't know it as of now. And so as soon as we know, I'm very fine by talking about this, but now I won't. So let's go to the next one. And this is a big one, to be honest, because the people say that the pathing update should have been in the old games already. And that's simply a very interesting thing to say because I do agree that it should have been in, but the fact is, it's not been in, you know? And it is the most criticized aspect of this game, if I at least check my comments, you know? 8 years of doing YouTube, 8 years of doing Planet games, from Planet Coaster to Planet Zoo. This is the single most criticized aspect of both games in common, because it is kind of a hard thing, and I do know for a fact that at least a couple thousand people stopped playing the game because of the pathing. So it is a fundamental thing that they have completely changed from the ground up. And I do get if people say it should have been in the first game. Well, and I do agree, but what I do not agree to is many people say it feels like a minor update now. That, to me, and sorry to use these words, is bullshit, because this is a revolution. It is not an evolution. They have completely reworked the whole system from the ground up. We've not been able to do any of these things we've seen in the short demo, and we haven't even seen the full tool in action. There were even more tabs they didn't even reveal. So for me personally, this is a absolute no argument, because it is not valid. This hasn't been in the first game, is a fact, and so it's now in the second game, and they have done a proper update to that. So definitely nothing that should be, you know, counted as a DLC only or whatnot. This is completely something that requires a complete rework of the engine and of the game itself. The next point is pools. Well, pools are obviously the big selling point of the new game, and obviously it had been very obvious that a lot of people will come out and say this should have been a DLC. And where do I start? I do agree to a certain point that this could have been a DLC simply because I personally don't feel like pools are such an essential part of a game as, for example, birds would have been in Planet Zoo. So it is a very good thing to see that we do have now pools from the very beginning as a core part of it as a game. But I do agree that this is not as a fundamental change to a game to call it a second part only, you know, if only that. However, a lot of people also claimed, and this is the second part in this, you know, major complaint that people have, that it feels almost like the Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 pools plus X. And again, I do agree, but I think it's just how you phrase that and how you frame that, because Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Soaked was a very proper add-on. we are going to talk about that in a little bit, you know. Add-on DLC, they are not the same thing, you know. And this has been a very proper, back in the day, I believe it was 29 euros even, or 29.99 euros, the soaked add-on, which is, you know, to nowadays standards would be a good 49 euros or something. So it was a substantial update, and it better would have been good, and it has been good. So I think it's not really a negative to call this a Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 level of implementation, and to be honest, it's not. You know, looking at the pools and so on, all the forms and all these things obviously are a lot more you know, customizable, and there are a lot of different rides in. You have a lot of different options from the Planet games, obviously, of, you know, building everything custom, and, you know, with all the scenery aspects and not being tucked to a grid anymore. There are a lot of advantages, but I do get the aspect to say it is only a Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 level of thing. But, you know, to understand how I rate this point, you have to follow me through the end to the video, because, again, I think there is one major misunderstanding which leads to a lot of people assuming this should have been a DLC or a update or whatnot. But we will talk about that. Let's go first of all to the fourth major point. And that is, actually the content itself doesn't feel enough, or doesn't feel more like a proper DLC. And I gotta say, already now, this is a big no for me. This is a big, I don't know, is it fishing for likes or complaints just for the sake of complaining? I don't know. But, you know, looking at all the stuff that we've already seen in this gameplay reveal is already so much more than I would have dreamed of. You know, for a certain amount of rides and coasters and stuff like that, it was a given. But the fact that they added so much more customizability will make the flat rides so much more usable over the flat rides in the past update, so, or in the past game. So every single of these flat rides, for example, accounts now for all the actually 5 themes in the game. The game will again start with 5 themes, and I personally don't think they should have taken all the old themes into that one. A, because I don't think that all of the old themes were good, so it's great to have new ones. And at some point, you know, they gotta make money, so it is fine. But definitely it's good to know that they did start with 5 themes right off the back, so that's really good. And honestly, we don't even know yet how much content there will be at the release. I do agree that it should be a bit more than Planet Coaster 1 had at the beginning, but you know, let alone the addition of the pools make the whole game already feel more complete. We will have to revisit this point once we do know exactly what the content of the game is, but understanding that this was the very first gameplay reveal and we still have a couple of months until the release of this game, I definitely don't want to say the content is too little or it's just enough for a DLC. Again, that is just fishing for likes or whatnot. I don't really agree to that one. Anyways, let's talk about the last one, and this is a very interesting one, because that last point is the graphics haven't improved. And this is interesting because I had the same discussion with Sylph and Lady right after we've seen the first gameplay reveal in this exclusive influencer event. And frankly, that was recorded on console, and the bitrate of the streaming was very poor. I would even go that far, it wasn't even 1080p, it felt more like 720p. So it wasn't really easy to understand if the graphics have been any good or so. And just as Sylph said, in the first moment, we thought, or actually most people thought, that was just Planet Coaster 1, and then they would transition over into the new game. But apparently that did not happen, and it was already Planet Coaster 2. So we were a bit worried. And is this me saying the graphics are bad? Not at all. Seeing, you know, the new gameplay reveal and also the screenshots we've received so far, the engine obviously did improve quite dramatically over the time, and it looks a lot better, even better than Planet Zoo does. The only thing why it is different is, and this is where we have to talk about, is the art style of the game. So, you don't like this comic-y art style? Well, it's not for you, I guess, because this isn't by any means leaned towards realism, at least not in that sense, in regards to the people. The rest of the game is. And then we have a second little issue over here. Everything seems to be a little bit oversaturated and a little bit too poppy. I did actually do the test and reduced a couple of, the hue, saturation and blah blah from the images and tried to make it a bit more similar to Planet Zoo, and it immediately looked a lot better. But what I would really emphasize you to do is look beyond the colors and what you see, and look at the engine related things and lighting and stuff like that. Look at how good the anti-aliasing is for the plants, for example, in the gameplay. Look at all these things and you will notice that the graphics have improved dramatically. But again, if you're not a fan of these comic-y people, hell, that is something we can't get rid of, and they won't. And so if that is a thing for you, you have a fair point here. I do think they created a brand with Planet, with the Planet series. They created a brand, and why would they change from that? And honestly, a different point is that this is all built by Frontier. It's the tropical biome as it feels like. It should be summer as it feels like. So a lot of little pieces, puzzle pieces, come together to make it look the way it is. I would really love to see how this game looks once there is rain activated or once there is snow activated. And maybe we are not in a tropical biome, but we are in the European biome. The game will already look so much different and people will say, oh my god, it's looking so much better now. And also, let Sylph just build a main street and have a look at what this looks like versus what you're seeing right now in the game. So all I'm saying is, engine-wise, the graphics have improved dramatically, and this is what I was hoping for. I was hoping for at least the level of Planet Zoo. They've achieved that. They've even improved over the plants a little bit and also over the people. So I'm very happy with this, and I personally do like the art style of the guests a lot, because I know zooming out, it's going to form a very believable crowd, which I'm a big fan of. Anyhows, again, just for the sake of saying the graphics are bad, I absolutely don't agree. But if you're not a fan of the art style of the game, well, then it's a point, but it's not certainly an aspect of the graphics being bad. It's just the art style not matching what you would have loved it to be. And do I think this should have been a bit more realistically? Well, potentially, but I like what I'm seeing, and this is my personal opinion, obviously. But just as a more, objective point of view, this is a good graphic, and the graphics are a lot better than Planet Coaster 1, objectively. And so we can't say it's bad graphics, because it isn't. But again, the art style is a different story. Anyhows, let's go to the conclusion when we've now talked about all these 5 points. So, I think it's no surprise that I wouldn't agree with the statement that Planet Coaster 2 is only being, more like a Planet Coaster 1.5. We've talked about these points, and to be fair, some of them I do agree to a certain extent, some others I don't. However, and before I give you my final, opinion on that, let me give you a bit of a context. Planet Coaster is an 8-year-old game, and Frontier Developments is a company that back in the day had a huge success with Planet Coaster. And Planet Coaster is a game that created a brand new genre for them. Like, actually, it's not a brand new genre. They continued upon what they have been very strong at with Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, for example. And they have been very positively received with this, and I do believe that Planet Coaster 1, and you've seen my love letter and so on, is just a very, very good game. So it is already a pretty hard game to compete with in the first place. Then we also have a second point. During all these 8 years, Frontier has been developing from a tiny indie studio almost to a well-known, worldwide, big received studios with 2 of the biggest IPs in the world, being Jurassic World and Formula 1, for example. And Frontier did a couple of mistakes, huge mistakes, and they have slipped into a financial crisis, just as a majority of the market has. So, here we are. Now, without even knowing the game as it is right now, and without even knowing what exactly Planet Coaster 2 will be in the end, just imagine for a second, with this context I just gave you, Frontier would have released this as a DLC for, let's say, $29.99, because that would be the equivalent of the add-on of Soaked back in the day. Now, first of all, I would think this would be a very chunky DLC, but how do you think would they have paid the whole dev team to develop such a thing? The second aspect is, there would have been a very let's phrase it differently. It wouldn't have been possible to update the pathing at all. They wouldn't have touched that, because for an 8-year-old game, bringing that onto a new engine would have been already quite a work. And then also updating all of this and giving these core changes to console, you couldn't. And also the decision to only go to next-gen consoles and leaving out the pre-gen or last-gen consoles would also make an effect. Imagine midway through they would have said, hey, here you go, you've got a brand new super add-on, but it's only for the new gen, and then all the people with the last gen would have been left alone. You wouldn't do that. So that alone is already pretty stupid to think of. But then how, with this price point, you know, and with this old game not being able to build a new audience for that, how on earth would you sustain a development team to continue doing that? So, and this is the second part of the context. We are living in 2024. The days of add-ons or big packs are gone. This is not how the industry works anymore. Look at the EA, look at all the others, look at FIFA, blah, blah, blah. DLCs are not the big add-ons anymore. DLCs are almost like quarterly, tiny pieces of content to keep the game alive over a longer time, to keep on gaining money, to feed and pay your development team. That's what you do. And to be precise, Frontier even has this as their main strategy on their annual reports. This is kind of develop and nurture. This is how they call that. So why would you do an update to an 8-year-old game where you know that you potentially would bring back 20% of the audience, if at all? So it doesn't make any sense to bring this out as a DLC in the first place. And now I need to get back to all these 5 criticisms, because to be fair, there is a lot of fair criticism in here, and I also have a lot of, I'm hesitant still to a lot of points. I do think they have to blow us away with the Coaster Builder. If the Coaster Builder is just a minor update to the last one, I also would feel a little bit, let's say, at least worried. But I don't think so, because what I've seen so far from the game is that Frontier did something I have not expected. And let me put that to the very obvious context here. I think in the current situation that Frontier are in, we could have also easily seen a relatively cash-grabby Planet Coaster 2. You know, having like a sloppy pool stuff in and just a couple new coasters and not that much of a graphics change, and leave the pathing as is, or just give us one or two little updates that would make it a tiny bit better but not completely better. Honestly, I was worried this would happen, because I thought, you know, people would buy it anyways, and then they do this to gain money first of all. But they have not. They have really reworked a lot of things, and the pathing is not alone about the pathing itself. It's how you can interact now with plazas, just plopping all the rides in there and everything works. Then how you have now blueprints that have not only the scenery and the coaster itself in, no, you also have the queue and the pathing in, which is a huge deal. The new way how the workshop works, the fact that you can play cross-platform, you have a cross-platform market, the fact that they have actually worked so hard on not only having pools but also have a management aspect with shade and sunscreen in there. We've got weather, we've got all these major updates. We know that there is at least a new coaster builder, but we don't know how exactly it's going to look like. All these things, for me personally, are more than enough to believe that we are up to a very good start of Planet Coaster 2. And if you look at all the other successor games released lately, Cities Skylines 2 and so on, they all started with a lot of problems, and I don't even see this happening. I think we're going to go for a very, very strong start, again, in competition to a very strong game that was Planet Coaster 1 in the first place. So, I don't understand all this criticism, not at all. I was worried in the first place, but after all I've seen, I'm not at all worried anymore. We can discuss about the amount of content when it's released. We can discuss about if they do the typical Frontier and leave out stuff from Planet Zoo that has already been in. For example, restaurants or souvenir shops. I could totally see that being that they do this, and I would be very mad about this, but we all know that this would be following with some free updates sooner or later. Is this cool? Not really, but it's kind of expectable. So this is nothing fundamental, you know? The fundamental things they have touched. And this is why I'm very positive, and I would ask you guys to, before you go in and complain so much about this, put this all into context, you know, put this all into context that the people working at Frontier need to be paid after all, and that a new game that should last for the next 8 years potentially needs a solid foundation and a solid development team that is paid, that has resources to keep on developing. And I see this happening. So yeah, that's my point of view here. And I wanted to discuss this really quickly, which wasn't that quickly in 20 minutes, but hey, here we go. Let me know your opinion in the comments down below, and I talk to you in the next one.